Good morning. I'm Chaplain John Mollison with the Dobbins Air Reserve Base Chapel, and thank you so much for joining us for our second study on the Sermon on the Mount. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, starting with in verse 5, Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, it's interesting that Jesus said that because later on in Matthew chapter 11, verse 29, Jesus was referring to himself, and he said, "Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me that I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Only one other person other than Jesus is referenced about or recorded as being meek in the Bible, and that was Moses. And we can read about that in Numbers chapter 12, verse 3. Now, Moses was certainly a godly example, and of course, Jesus is God. And I can't think of anybody else that I would rather be like than Jesus. Now, Moses might be a close second, but Jesus is certainly who we aspire to be like as Christians. So as Christians, we see that Jesus is meek, so we should desire to be meek as well. We also read about meekness in Psalm 37, verse 11, where we read, "But the humble, the meek, will inherit the land and will enjoy abundant prosperity." So certainly when Jesus wrote this in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, it was a reference to that passage in Numbers. Now, we understand that meek are those who don't think less of themselves, but simply those who don't consider themselves at all. They always consider Christ and then what they can do for others. A meek person is not a weak person, but a strong person in Christ. Now, Sinclair Ferguson adds that meekness is the humble strength that belongs to a person who has learned to submit to the difficulties, knowing that in everything, God is working for our good. The meek person is one who has stood before God's judgment and surrendered all of our supposed rights to God. We've learned to have gratitude for God's grace and to submit ourselves to the Lord and to be gentle with others. This is what meekness is about, and we understand that the meek will inherit the earth. We read that in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5 as well. And of course, this is a reference to the earthly reign of Jesus and the millennial reign, which we can read about in Revelation 20, verses 1 through 6. But it also certainly includes the recreated and restored earth that accompanies the new heavens and the new Jerusalem, which we can read about in Revelation 21 and 22. Certainly two very encouraging passages, which I would encourage you to read whenever you have a chance. I pray this brought you hope and encouragement today. Until next time, I'm Chaplain John Mollison with the Dobbins Air Reserve Base Chapel.